Hello, everyone. Today I'm here with Jill. And what I love about Jill is that she was a registered nurse in the conventional space, and now she's taking more of a holistic approach and helping women with diet, with supplements, and even she's more in that women's education space around health and helping them take an approach where it's healthy and they can still enjoy their life. Welcome, Jill. I would love to learn your story and why you decided to take this approach.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here, and I hope that your viewers get a lot out of this talk that we're going to have today. So, as you said, I've been a nurse for 27 years, and I was mainly in women's health. I was in pediatrics, and then I was in research. So, those were sort of the three pieces of my nursing career that I sort of hung out in. And I've always had this, I guess, love for women's health because I think because I am a woman, because I see what women go through. I see how much they're juggling in their lives. And so I think when, times over time where I started seeing myself venturing out of conventional medicine a little bit, I was just really uniquely drawn to women, to helping women, because I've seen so much of their struggles being on the conventional side with hormone issues, with, fertility, with all kinds of things. I would say it was about 10 years ago that I really started going down that sort of integrative path to health. So I was still in nursing in the conventional medicine world, and I have four kids. And my oldest daughter was having a lot of digestive issues, and we were just hitting brick walls in the conventional medicine side of the world. And as most moms do, when you are not getting a lot of help, or you don't feel like you're getting the support you need, you start researching. And so I started researching, and somehow, some way, I started stumbling into this whole world of integrative medicine and functional medicine and food as medicine and lifestyle as medicine and all of these things. And I think it was just this missing piece of my sort of in my healthcare professional world. I saw this whole other piece of the world. And so I decided that that was really where I wanted to learn more. And so I started formalizing my education and getting certified and I went through a health coaching program, followed by another health coaching program, followed by functional medicine training, women's health training. So I've been really sort of down that road of functional medicine and looking at symptoms and the root cause of disease and the root cause of dysfunction. And lo and behold, here I am now working as a women's health educator with women. I would say most of my clients are between about 35 and older, that are on that perimenopausal spectrum. So maybe done having kids, maybe still having kids, but sort of hormonally shifting. And they tend to run into some, deeper hormone issues and deeper physical issues in general. So it's been a really fun place to be, to work with women.
I love that. I mean, can you imagine having like autoimmune conditions, hormonal
Mhm.
issues, gut issues, and you're kind of just hit with all these things at one time? And I think 35 is the age. I mean, sometimes sooner, but it's when your hormones, your whole body chemistry totally just changes on you out of nowhere, it almost feels like.
Yeah, it does. It does. And I think to your point, it's sort of these little symptoms that women feel that they don't really tie to anything other than, especially if they're a mom, like maybe I'm tired, or if they're a working professional, maybe I'm working a lot of hours. And it's sort of like this, it's like these silent, slow symptoms that all of a sudden it's like they wake up one day and feel like they have a million symptoms that they've just sort of been creeping in slowly over time. And then we have to really start to dive in and figure out, where we need to begin and how we kind of start that work. So yeah, it is. It's that mid 30s. I think that's where I see a lot of it happening too.
Absolutely. And like when you start working with women around that age who are dealing with all these issues, where do you even look? Like, do you look at the immune system? Do you start in the gut, the hormones? Where do you even start? Because there's so
Yeah.
many things going on.
There's so much. I mean, I think what I have really found is, to your point, the immune system is, I don't think the immune system got enough attention at least when I was in the conventional medicine world, it was sort of just, we really thought about it as that was the thing that fought colds and the flu and little things that came up. But I think with this sort of surge in autoimmune conditions, we've really seen that the immune system is responsible for so much more than just surveying and fighting off a virus here and there. There's so much more that the immune system does. So typically when I'm working with women, I mean, we're doing a pretty substantial, obviously, intake to look at everything, but I try not to overwhelm them. We have to kind of break it down a little bit. And I think I try to take women down to back to the basics, because we can get really caught up in autoimmune conditions and whatever's going on in their body, whether it's hormonal or autoimmune or cancer or something very significant. If you sort of go back to the basics, looking at your diet, looking at how you're digesting food, to your point about gut health, we know so much of the immune system is housed in the gut. So we look really deeply at gut health. And I don't mean just in terms of testing. It's really looking at how is the person eating? Are you digesting your food? Do you have strong stomach acid? Are you absorbing nutrients? So we're looking at the things, the foundational things, the hydration, the sleep. Are you sleeping? Because I think we sort of poo-poo a lot of these things as like low-hanging fruit, like, oh, it's just sleep, or it's just food, or it's just, water that I should be drinking. But when you look at the things that support the body, this is it. I mean, sleep is what really, supports our immune system. It's when we clean up the metabolic waste of the day. We build hormones. We're doing so much work while we're sleeping. And we are a society that cuts into sleep like crazy. You know that, especially as a woman.
And especially with a type A personality, that now I've calmed down a lot. But before, I thought, wow, I was like totally, wrecking my body and leading up to all of this. And sleep was like sort of the indicator of whether my gut was working effectively or not. Also, like other symptoms, I know women, face like cold feet, cold hands, hair loss, like weight gain, and they have all these symptoms. And do you see that like healing the gut usually gets rid of these, or is it about building that immune resilience?
I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, I think that healing the gut is definitely a big part of it. I think to your point about like the cold hands and feet and just the hormonal symptoms, we look at hormones, I think hormones as a big family, because and they function well together or they dysfunction just like a family. So, we can't look at one single hormone. When we're looking at thyroid, for instance, you can look at thyroid and that's great, but we really do have to look at the other hormones too, because they all are so interconnected. So I think we do women a disservice when we only, even when it's just maybe they present with thyroid symptoms. I have a thyroid workbook that's actually free, or a hormone workbook that's free on my website, where it has symptoms related to all different kinds of hormonal imbalances. And so I tell women, download the workbook and work through that and see where you may be having symptoms, because you'll see a lot of crossover. And then we start to figure out, okay, so if you have these hormone imbalances, let's step back from that again. Again, are you sleeping? Because you do need to sleep in order to make hormones and neurotransmitters, which work very closely with hormones. We have to clean the gut up because they have a lot to do with hormones, neurotransmitters, again, which work very closely together. And the immune system, of course, is such a big one. So I think we do look at the gut. That's a really, really big piece. I know one of the things we had kind of emailed back and forth about was protocols. And one of the things I try to almost stay away from giving a woman like a protocol, or here's my customized protocol for just all women. Everyone is so different. And so I think we have to evaluate each woman, individually to see what their body needs and look at the environment they're in, because I think a lot of their healing, you cannot heal in the same environment in which you got sick. So if all of these things were happening, let's just say you're cutting into sleep and you're eating a processed food diet and you're running around like a maniac and you've got this crazy job and you're taking care of your parents and your kids and all these things, and you want to get better in terms of thyroid health, immune function health, any other hormone imbalances, you can't keep living this exact same way and expect that, a thyroid pill is going to get you better. That's going to take you there. We really have to look at that big picture and that whole environment. That's where the holistic piece comes in. Let's look at how you're living your life and figure out how we can just slowly, very slowly make these tiny little shifts over time so that you create an environment that really is conducive to healing and to supporting function in the body.
I love that. Yeah. And I mean, when we try to create that environment, I know many of the women are still dealing with these symptoms of like weight gain and hair loss and feeling fatigue. What are your tips for these sort of symptoms? Because I know you're all about enjoying your life and as you become healthy, but like when you're dealing with these, it kind of deters like your confidence and
Yeah. Yeah.
and even leads you into depression because you feel like, okay, well, people are going to judge me. I don't want to go out. I don't want to be seen in the public. And it's almost like a cycle. It's a never ending cycle.
It is. And for women, to your point, I mean, we really, and I can't speak for all women, but I think most women would say it's really disheartening to see hair, just kind of coming out in clumps or losing a lot more hair than usual. Same thing with weight gain. I think it's really, really hard to see that. It's kind of a loaded question because I think sometimes medications are a great way to kind of start the ball rolling. And when I say medications, especially related to hormones, hair loss could be related to thyroid health, of course, can also be related to testosterone issues in women. I see that a lot. It can be related to low iron. So I think, again, it comes back to, it's interesting when you step back from all of it, we have to look at that bigger picture and make sure that the nutrients are there and other things are in place. Sleep is there and all the things. From a weight perspective, I usually tell women if, weight is your biggest thing. The unfortunate thing is that I think weight sometimes will be the last thing to kind of correct itself because the body will drop weight when it will get to that place of the ideal weight for you when it feels relaxed and calm and it feels like everything is where it needs to be. And so I tell women, let's work on the pieces. So if it's not food, overtly food, like let's say you are bringing in way more calories than the energy that you're expending. Okay, so let's get that off the table.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of food? Let's look at that. Sometimes I think medications, and I would imagine with your community, thyroid medications can go a long way to at least getting a woman to a place where it's improving her thyroid function a little bit. It may not be 100%, but it's getting her to a place where she feels a little bit better. She may even lose a little bit of weight because her metabolism, it's that metabolic, it's in charge of our metabolism. So I think sometimes medications, whether they're used short or long term, can be very helpful. I think other hormone replacement, especially in the perimenopausal and menopausal women, should not be discounted because as hormones go down, we don't feel like ourselves and our bodies don't function optimally. And female hormones, estrogen, testosterone, and progesterone are not just about making babies. They have to do with, again, giving us this wonderful hair, beautiful skin, great blood vessels, vaginal health, bladder health, bone health, brain health, mood issues. So it's all there. So I think sometimes working in tandem with a physician where we're doing some hormone testing, I think hormone testing is really key when you're working through a lot of these issues, just to see if there are some hormonal issues at play, which I would say 99.9% of the time with weight, I would imagine you've seen that as well. Hormonal issues are at play.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Especially estrogen dominance and,
Yeah.
having all those symptoms of like thyroid, estrogen dominance, the
Yeah.
testosterone, overly producing androgens. And I know with me, I like took the thyroid medication, actually did my body a disservice. And I was trying to figure out like my whole journey, like why, like
Mm-hmm.
actually when I started taking it, I started getting all the symptoms of somebody who doesn't have a good functioning thyroid.
Mm-hmm.
And I found out, it was like my adrenal glands that were really shot, and
Yeah.
it wasn't my thyroid that was the issue. So I went to sort of fix that. And then I know that like after I started fixing the adrenals, the TSH went back to normal. Everything kind of just went back to normal.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, with all these different labs that you order, you get the TSH, you get the free T3, the free T4. Have you ever seen a case where, you know, the TSH may be elevated, but the thyroid hormones like the free T3, free T4 are completely normal, reverse T3 is normal? Um,
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I've seen the gamut of thyroid labs, and I think sometimes it can be such a complex process. I think toxins are a big part of the equation as well. And so I think, you know, knowing that we need, our thyroid needs tyrosine and iodine to make these thyroid hormones. In the environment, we have fluoride and chloride and chlorine and bromine that compete with iodine. So I think sometimes with labs in particular, they can actually show up. It may show up sort of like we have okay thyroid labs because we have these competing halogens that look like a little bit like thyroid hormone, but they're actually not. And so I think sometimes that's where I think the symptoms are really the key. Sometimes I think the thyroid labs, I've found, I would say like 99% of the time, I have women who their thyroid labs look like they're okay, but their symptoms are all still there. And so I think sometimes there's just this huge difference because I think of toxins, because we can't measure, even if we can measure thyroid hormones in the blood, we don't know if it's actually getting into the cell. So there's no way to test that. So I think I think all hormones can be kind of complex in that way.
yeah, and a lot of these hormones, it seems like they have similar symptoms, you know,
They
and
do.
so like to really find out what is wrong is it's almost like a mystery in itself to find out which hormone is off since they have so many similar symptoms.
I agree. And I think sometimes too, I find that women who, especially in sort of that perimenopausal, menopausal range, and so again, perimenopause is just that time sort of in that mid to late 30s where progesterone is declining, estrogen is actually kind of fluctuating high and low. And because you can experience a lot of estrogen dominance, that's a period of time too where regulating those hormones, getting them back in balance. It may seem funny because a lot of women will say, well, I'm too young for hormone replacement, but you know, we really want to look at what are those levels. If you don't have enough progesterone to balance out estrogen, you're going to be kind of off, and thyroid hormone will be affected as well. So sometimes women will take thyroid hormone, but if estrogen and progesterone are off, we need to get those back in balance and they'll have a better response to their thyroid medicine. So it
Mhm.
is sort of, I mean, that's where I think sometimes when it's, you know, I don't prescribe, I'm a nurse, so I don't prescribe. I help women sort of navigate that. But I always tell women it's so important to research and really find someone who understands the entire world of hormones deeply, because you need to have someone that understands that estrogen and progesterone and testosterone affect, and cortisol and DHEA, you know, all of the hormones affect thyroid and vice versa. So that when you are working through a treatment plan, you know, sometimes you're bringing that medication on board while doing a lot of the behind the scenes stuff, like looking at toxins and looking at stress and sleeping more and bringing in a better nutrient rich diet. But you want to have someone that understands how those hormones affect each other so that you know that if you're depleted in one area, they understand that maybe bringing just a little bit of something else on board may help that picture. And I don't know if that was the case for you, but I know that is for a lot of women.
You know, it's interesting because many doctors say, oh, you should not do like HRT or, you know,
Yeah.
because they believe that your body will stop producing these hormones on their own. And then there are other doctors that are like, you need, you know, HRT to be able to get rid of your symptoms. So
Hmm.
I think it leaves a lot of women confused and a little bit fearful of replacing their hormones with like hormones, because they're going to be, they feel like, okay, well, when my hormones do balance out, am I going to have too much of a hormone or, you know, so I think that's where the fear is.
Yeah, and I think about hormones as something that, I mean, they really, hormones run the body. I think we often think about them as, being for something just very specific, but hormones, there's hormone receptors from head to toe. With thyroid, we have thyroid hormone receptors all over our body. The same is true about estrogen, testosterone, progesterone. So when we lose those hormones, our bodies feel it deeply. Now, to your point, when do you start hormone replacement? There are different schools of thought. I think we always want to find out, why is there a hormone decline? So if, we would expect in our mid to late 30s to start having some cycles. If you're a woman who's menstruating and you typically ovulate regularly, ovulation is the only way to produce progesterone. So if you no longer ovulate, or you only ovulate sporadically because you're starting that perimenopausal journey, progesterone will go down. And so it will only go back up if you're ovulating regularly. So women have to understand, I think that's where the education piece is so important, to understand this path that we take towards menopause. It's about can be a 5 to 15 year window. So hormones are going to be changing. And so we want to sort of, we can test hormones so we can follow them. We can work, if we work with practitioners that understand hormones, we're going to get the right information, but there's nothing really to fear. We're not talking about using huge amounts. We're just talking about, hey, if we see someone who's really looking like they're on that decline, or let's say there's someone who doesn't ovulate at all, or they're in perimenopause and they're all over the board, and their cycles are all over the map, and we know it's not related to thyroid hormone, it's probably related to progesterone. Maybe they could use a little bit of progesterone to help balance out that estrogen. So I think it's just understanding the hormones more than anything.
And what are your thoughts around, like, there's pills, there's creams, there's injections, there's so many different things that are being marketed out there. And for the average woman, it's kind of like, it's just, they're just like bombarded with so many options. They don't even know what to do.
Yeah. It's so in general I actually have, I released a guide last month called the Peri to Menopause Roadmap. And I have a whole section on hormone replacement and other things as well. We talk about all kinds of hormones and some targeted remedies for people that don't want to use hormones or aren't ready for hormones quite yet, or maybe just have hormonal issues that can be remedied with some targeted treatments, whether it's some nutrients that they need, or maybe something else, some specific targeted herbs or something like that. In terms of hormones like estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, the studies show that topical estrogen is safest, just because oral estrogen tends to raise blood clotting factors. So you can get a little bit more risk for clotting issues like we see with the birth control pill. We need higher doses of oral estrogen to achieve the job. And topical estrogen is really sort of the gold standard when it comes to hormone replacement. So most physicians will do topical estrogen. Progesterone is a little bit of a different story. Most of the studies actually show that oral progesterone, which is different than progestin, and women don't really understand the difference, but progestin is what's in the birth control pill. That's synthetic. We would want progesterone, which is what our body makes. The oral form is typically, women find the most benefit from that, I guess, in terms of, especially in the mid to late 30s, when women start to struggle a little bit with sleep. Oftentimes that's because progesterone is dropping. And so oral progesterone does a really nice job, and it actually hits the GABA receptor in our brain, which is our calming neurotransmitter. So we can be calmer, we can get oftentimes sleep better at night and things like that. So typically for progesterone, we'll do a pill, and testosterone is usually in the form of a cream. So that's just because we can regulate it. I mean, hormones, like all hormones, whether it's thyroid hormone or any other hormone.
Therapy.
Okay. So yeah, hormone replacement therapy. Um, so I think, so how far did you get with, did you hear me talk about oral
Yeah.
estrogen?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I think follow-up testing, when women say, I'm afraid of, the idea is that we're not giving women these huge amounts of hormones. It's just like thyroid hormone. We give Women, we want to get to optimal levels where women will have protection in their body so that they have protection against, osteoporosis and cognitive decline and heart disease and all of those types of things. So that's really the idea, but also that we alleviate symptoms.
Absolutely. And do you see that like a lot of this can be fixed through the gut, or is it like, should we start at like replacing the hormones?
I mean, I think always starting with the natural and seeing why hormones are dropping. I think, at some point though, it's kind of like, and I say to my clients that have teenage daughters, you can try to put puberty off as long as you want, but when the body's ready, your daughter is going to go through puberty no matter what, which means it's going to ramp up the hormones. When our bodies are the timeline for us specifically, whatever your individual timeline is to go through that perimenopausal toward menopausal journey, the ovaries start shutting down. And so knowing that the ovaries are going to start to dissipate, stop to produce hormones in the way that they were, we know that hormones will decline. So I think it comes down to a woman's preference, but understanding that when hormones decline, and they will, whether there's lots of herbs that are on the market, there's lots of remedies. And I'm a fan of like maca and taste tree and, the B vitamins. Let's try to get ovulation going. Let's do all the things we can to get the vitamins and nutrients and minerals to support hormone production. But at the end of the day, when the ovaries are no longer getting the signal from our brain to produce the hormones that they're used to producing, they won't produce those hormones. I almost say it's kind of like it starts off as like a spotty Wi-Fi signal. It sometimes does it and sometimes doesn't. And over time, the signal is just sort of lost. So, the hormone production shifts to our adrenal glands. That's really what's going to produce hormones. And there's not a whole lot that we're going to produce. We're not ovulating anymore. So that's the point where we want to start thinking it's a natural part of life, but we're now living a lot longer than we used to. We used to, in the year 1900, the average life expectancy was 50, and menopause happened at the average age for menopause was 51. So we didn't go through this. Now we're living to 80 because of, medications and heat and sanitation and food and all these things. So if we're going to live that long, to think about we're going to miss a lot of that hormonal benefit from 50 to 80. So we might want to think about replacing hormones as they start to dissipate.
I love that. Yeah, because there's so many different sort of diagnoses and things out there that could be like triggering any of these hormones and even the thyroid. You just never know. And I know that you've worked with a lot of women who have Hashimoto's, PCOS. Can you share a few of your experiences with us?
Yeah, so I would say in general, I mean, I think in the almost 5 years that I've been coaching, specifically in the women's health space as a coach, as opposed to being a nurse, I've only had one client who did not have a thyroid issue. So it really is epidemic. And so a lot of what we're doing now, some have antibodies, some don't. So we really try to do, our very best to improve as much as we can that thyroid function and just hormone function overall. So I would say in general, we are working on the things I talked about: the sleep, the diet, the nutrient absorption. For a lot of women, they will see a big improvement when they look at these things, when they start to take toxins out, because toxins look like our hormones. And from our body's perspective, they're hormone mimickers. So I always tell women, there's only, I think about a hormone receptor as a chair. And if the hormone disrupting chemical sits in the chair, that hormone can't sit in the chair. Only one thing can sit in the chair. So we've got to start getting rid of those toxins, those hormone disrupting chemicals. I think that's where I've seen, whether it's PCOS or thyroid related issues or anything else, if a woman is still, in reproductive years and her ovaries are working or should be working really at full capacity still, and they're not, oftentimes if we start to look at things that are upsetting the gut, upsetting the immune system, toxins and stress, those are probably, actually I would say toxins and stress are probably the two biggest things that I see that really will disrupt that hormonal production and hormonal communication. So if we can get women to slowly start swapping out personal care products. And I tell women maybe one product a month. Maybe it's your deodorant. When the deodorant is gone, buy an organic deodorant. Maybe it's the lotion you're putting on your skin. Just one product a month. Maybe you start thinking about what's in your kitchen and, not putting things in plastic, putting them in glass containers. And women kind of look at me like, really, this is going to have a huge benefit. But plastics and a lot of the ingredients in our personal care products are just loaded with hormone disrupting chemicals. So if women can start even there, I think that's a huge place for them to start seeing an improvement. And they will. And I've had women who have said, in 3 months, they've lost weight simply because they've gotten toxins out of their world, or started to at least reduce toxins, or maybe reducing some foods that they are sensitive to. So sometimes they'll do some food sensitivity testing, because that can cause inflammation. It obviously causes inflammation in the gut, makes the immune system upset. So, I'll have them keep a food mood journal, and we'll look at, hey, what foods may be causing issues, get rid of a few of those. I mean, I've had clients who have lost, it depends, but some will have lost 10, 15, 20 pounds just by getting rid of toxins and releasing those food sensitivities, or those foods that they're sensitive to, because now their body can relax and it feels good, and it's getting back to a place of function, and it's working well. So hormones start to come back online. Everything starts to communicate better. So I think those are some really, I don't say low hanging fruit, because it takes some work. I don't know if you've experienced that, or if your community, I'm assuming, is probably, familiar with that, toxins and stress and all of that stuff.
Of course. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I know I'm like hypersensitive to my environment and environmental toxins. Like for me, if I was in a room where people were smoking, I would be sick as a dog and
Yeah.
everybody else would be okay.
Yeah.
And I would wonder, why am I feeling like sick as a dog? Like I would have a runny nose. I would like feel like I had sinus issues and all this inflammation out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And it had a lot to do with the overload in my immune system already, and I think you're right. Like when we get rid of these toxins, it gives our immune system almost like a break to
Yeah.
recover, recharge, renew, and come back even stronger. Because the immune system is a fighter in itself, but when it's overloaded and there's so much buildup, how can it really fight?
Yeah, and I think that's where it does. It becomes that point where now it's just firing away all the time, because it's so overloaded, and it's like there's so many foreign things coming at it, that it becomes that kind of immune confusion. It's like, it doesn't ever get a break. It's really, the immune system is meant to just survey and sort of tolerate things, but I think we've thrown so much at it now with our world. And even if you are good at reducing and eliminating toxins, there's a lot of toxins that are going to be here just because they're here. Even if they've been banned, they're in the soil, or they're, in the paint on the walls, or, maybe a lot of us are at home now, but if you're in an office setting, what is the air quality like? What's your water like at home? What are you eating? Again, we go back to food, but there's a lot of chemicals in our food. So I think, we kind of just poo-poo a lot of that stuff and say, give me the supplements, tell me what supplements to take. But I think if we start to look at the foods and what's in them, and just read labels and look at the toxins in our environment, to your point, we start to give our body a break, and it starts to go, oh, okay, now I can breathe again. Now I can do my job, and I will release that weight, and I will get rid of those fat cells, or whatever it is that someone is struggling, or I can sleep again, or whatever it might be. It's like the inflammation goes down, and we start to feel like ourselves, and everything starts to improve.
Yeah, I think it's a huge struggle for many women who it's something that you can't really see. I mean, it's not like,
Mm.
you take a pill and you feel the effect right away. But
Yeah.
I think it makes a big difference. And, realistically, like I traveled a lot. Like I went to 40 different countries, and I couldn't live under a rock my entire life. So I knew I was going to be just exposed to toxins no matter where I went. And I thought I could, build my immunity to them. But when you try to build your immunity to something where it's like already fighting all these other things, you can't build immunity to anything, right?
Right, right, exactly. And you want to live your life. I mean, that's the thing, and you should. And I think that's where we go back to, like, if you just even sleep, that's a huge, not getting enough sleep has a huge effect on our immune function. So I think, I think starting like tiny audits and just having women, whether it's just, hey, work on getting consistent sleep for the next few weeks. It seems like such a no brainer and like, whatever, what is that going to do? But sleep has an immense impact. So that you can still enjoy, you should still be able to enjoy and travel and do these things. But I think on the other side, if we are working on our gut health, if we are making sure we're bringing in the right nutrients and making sure that we're eating slowly and that we're digesting our food and we're absorbing those nutrients, I mean, that's what our immune system needs. If it's not getting, even if we eat the food, I think we assume that we're eating food, we must be getting the nutrients. There's a little bit more to it, right? I mean, we have to be able to absorb the nutrients. So we have to look at that. And that's where sometimes the one-to-one work is really critical, because we'll really dive deep into, are you absorbing nutrients? Do you have enough, acid in your stomach to break apart, proteins and be able to pull those minerals apart and things like that, where we get into a little bit more of the deep stuff. But all of that really matters, chewing your food and kind of going down the digestive tract. And then to the point where we really start to look at gut healing and maybe some probiotics and some nutrition that will support, maybe sometimes it's some mucilaginous herbs or something to kind of heal that gut lining, depending on what's happening in a particular woman.
Right. And I guess like we've talked about so much. We talked about the gut, the hormones, the replacement therapy. What would you say your three biggest takeaways are?
Yeah, I think women should, number one, I think women need to trust themselves. If you feel like something is off in your body, it probably is. And I think, you know, get educated. I think getting educated for women to, start to really listen to their bodies and start to do the research or find practitioners or information and education that you trust, because I think it's so important to understand what's happening in your body. I think, going back to the basics, just don't complicate things. Really look at the basics: the food, the sleep, the water, the stress, the toxins, the movement. If you look at those truly and you really focus on those, just those, your body will find a place of balance. Your body didn't get that place without that. So getting those foundational pieces in place, I think, are huge. I think the third thing is really, I think, finding a practitioner. I do think that it's critical for women, and I guess I would say particularly women that are in that kind of mid-30 range, to start thinking about what practitioner, physician, naturopath, nurse practitioner, whoever it may be, they may want to work with or partner with as they age, because their body is going to go through changes. And so I think really finding someone that you trust, that you feel like is a partner in your health, that is listening to you, that knows their stuff. I mean, messing around with hormones is not a good idea. So just picking someone because a friend told you, I think you want to always find someone who really knows their stuff. And when it comes to hormones and hormonal health and women's health, because there's a lot more to it. Women are a lot more complicated than men. So I think we need to have someone who really understands the inner, how a body functions, that can really support us from kind of that mid-30s on, and maybe even early 30s for a lot of women. And oftentimes it's not your OBGYN as much as I would like it to be.
And that's what I learned the hard way, unfortunately, because
Yeah.
just through my genetic makeup, I found out that I actually went through perimenopause earlier than a lot of women would.
Yeah.
So, it's a lot of women don't even know when they go through it. And how can you really know unless you just see your symptoms? You can check
Yeah.
your hormones, but I mean, even with that, can you really diagnose perimenopause or not really, right?
Well, you can't, I mean, it typically kicks off with progesterone dropping for most, I would say most women. So, and we know it starts in the mid to late 30s. For some women, it's early 40s. And for some women, it's early 30s, especially if they have a family history, maybe a mom who went through menopause early, or other things were going on. There can definitely be other ways. But I think doing a hormone assessment is the best way, like looking at symptoms. Like I said, I have a free hormone workbook they can work through to see, hey, are these symptoms going down? Progesterone is first to decline. And then typically most hormones peak in our 20s. So we know we're almost kind of starting to go through perimenopause in a way after our 20s, because all hormones will start their decline a little at different rates. But I would say if you are someone who is in your mid to late 30s and you're experiencing symptoms, a lot of them can cross over with thyroid symptoms. So you kind of want to look at both. But I would say you can almost assume that some of perimenopause is starting. Women will have some periods or some cycles where they're not ovulating anymore. That just is sort of par for the course. And so that kind of kicks it off. So I would just sort of make the assumption that it's beginning, you know? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Jill. All your information has been extremely helpful, and I know the women are going to love this. A lot of them are confused on their journeys,
Yeah.
don't know where to start. They will love the workbook, going through these hormones and feeling like they're a little more knowledgeable around them and
Mm-hmm.
how they work. And thank you so much for your time. Any other comments? How do people contact you?
Yeah, so my website, I think you have it. So it's just www.jillchmielewski.com. I know it's a really long name, but I have like I said, the workbook is there. The perimenopause roadmap is there, which has lots and lots and lots of hormone education and resources and all kinds of things. And I do work with one-to-one clients, just a small handful of one-to-one clients at a time in more of an intensive setting, meaning it's really a partnership where it's for women who really, really, really want to try to get to the root cause of things and start to feel better in their body. So I have an intensive also on the website if people want to look at that. So yeah, and I'm on Instagram, so they can always go there. I typically put out a little bit of education every day, although I've been a little lax with sending kids back to school and getting back in the groove. But September I'll be back on the train. But yeah, I have a lot of information on my Instagram page as well.
Awesome. I'll add all these links, and I hope that we can have you back again sometime.
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks so much for having me. It was really a pleasure, and I hope that your community gets a lot out of our discussion today.
Awesome. Thank you.